Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is the founding drummer and songwriter in the Yardbirds, perhaps the most important rock band not named the Beatles. He's also an author who just released his second book called She Walks in Beauty. I'm just completely honored and humbled to welcome Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Jim McCarty. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Jeff. Lovely to be here today.
Well, like I said, you recently put out your second book, She Walks in Beauty. Your first book, Nobody Told Me, chronicled your musical career, but talk a bit about the interesting story that you tell in She Walks in Beauty.
Well, yes, I did the first book, which was sort of autobiographical, and everything was going very nicely until last year when I lost my wife to cancer. And so I set out on a sort of a journey to try and see what happened to her, because I didn't know much about these things. I was always interested in, paranormal stuff, but not as much. not as much when you're faced with something like that,
Right.
which was a big blow because she was quite a lot younger than me as well. And so I decided to look into it, and I studied sort of mediumship with some different mediums, particularly somebody called Suzanne Giesman, who's in the US, and she was actually at one time an officer in the US Navy. And she decided to become a medium when she lost her stepdaughter. In fact, she was hit by lightning.
Oh, wow.
So she became a medium. She studied it in England, and she started running some courses on Zoom, and I signed up for one. So I got to learn the mechanics a bit of how to do it, how to communicate, which I'd never done before. And I got some quite good results. I was quite pleased. And the fact that I could establish some sort of communication with my wife, it helped me a lot in the grieving process. And along the way, I think in one of the sessions, my wife suggested that I wrote a blog about my journey and about my experiences, and that became a book because I thought about it, and I got in touch with Dave Thompson, who co-wrote the other book with me, a very good rock and roll writer. And I didn't think he'd be at all interested in something like this, And he just jumped at it. He said, "Oh yes, I love all that stuff. Yes, I'm there. I'll start straight away." So we really got on with it, and I'm very pleased with how it's come out.
And like you said, you've always seemed to have an interest in that, even going back to the beginning, with the lyrics of happening 10 years time ago and things like that. Throughout your musical career, did you see it as sort of an outlet to kind of explore some of those interests that led up to this book?
Well, I think so. A lot of it is actually written about in the book. Keith Relf, the singer, and myself, we were very close, and we used to talk about all that stuff, flying saucers and Atlantis and all the interesting things in that sort of genre. And we did happenings 10 years time ago, as you say. We did the lyrics that was sort of about vaguely based on reincarnation, that we were coming across things that we'd seen somewhere before, in other lives. I think it was a good outlet, for the to answer your question, outlet for relaxation and getting away from the road, the strenuous activity of touring all the time. It was quite tiring. So we had lots of chats about all that stuff.
And you mentioned Keith and the Yardbirds, and let's kind of dig back through all of that for a little bit. The Yardbirds, you guys start off in '63, and at that point, the Beatles are already fully formed and writing their own songs. The Stones are still more of an R&B cover band. At the time when you guys took over their spot at the Crawdaddy. Your original guitarist, Top Topham, left the band, and Eric Clapton comes in. Sort of the big bang of rock guitar was, right there. Did you feel a change in the band when Eric came in and replaced Top?
Oh, I think so. Yes. I mean, technically, he was still learning, Eric, but he did have something about him, that sort of grabbed people's attention. He was that, destined to be a big star, really. I mean, we didn't really know it at the time. I mean, he was just one of the team, but he had I suppose it's an attitude. He sort of had an attitude about him that was interesting, and he got noticed, and he made sure he wore the right clothes, and he was very individual about how he looked. And it was interesting because playing somewhere like the Crawdaddy every week, I noticed that usually the girls would all congregate in front of the singer, be looking at Keith or whatever, but they started congregating in front of him, which was quite interesting to watch from the back.
Yeah, and Eric, you famously got dissatisfied with the commercial approach of the band, sort of getting away from the pure R&B of the time. And Jimmy Page turns down the initial offer to join, but recommends his buddy Jeff Beck. Did you know Jeff at all prior to him coming in, and how did his playing change where you guys were going as a band?
No, I didn't actually know Jeff at all, and I was quite surprised when he turned up, for the I mean, I say audition, but it was just a chat, come in and have a jam with us at the old Marquee Club, and he was he had really long hair, and he was very, had a dirty old oil stained clothes on and jeans. Obviously he'd been under a car or something, because he loved cars, but he gradually changed his image, obviously. But in terms of playing, I mean, he was fantastic from square one. He was a great player, and I'd say he changed our sound, because he took it from just being blues covers to something special. And all the feedback and the effects and his style and his variety of interests, it really gave birth to what the Yardbirds are famous for, I think.
Yeah. Well, and at that time too, "Shapes of Things" is really a touchstone moment in music. When I was a kid discovering guitar, that was the song that said, "Yeah, I really like that kind of thing." And after that song, you and Keith really began to write more and more original material. And did you start feeling a little more confident in with the musicianship in the band and your songwriting, begin to evolve it from just a straight up R&B band into really one of the first psychedelic bands in rock?
Yes, I mean, it was always quite a challenge to write, to write a hit song for the band. And Happenings 10 years time ago I think it was a lot before its time, because it wasn't, I don't think it was a top 20 hit even, maybe number 40 or something. It wasn't upon as a great pop hit. And it became a struggle, because we were touring all the time, and we didn't have really time to put into it, and then eventually, when we went with Mickey Most, we ran. I think we ran out of ideas as a band because we missed Paul Samuel Smith and Jeff because they were great collaborators and they were part of the great lineup that did like Over Under Sideways Down and all that stuff. So I don't think the chemistry was quite there, even though Keith and I still carried on writing when we could.
Yeah. And right around that time, Jimmy Page finally does join the band. First on bass when Paul left, and then as a second guitar with Jeff. And that classic lineup, was in the Michelangelo Antonioni movie Blow Up, where you guys did a slightly altered but completely blistering version of Train Kept a Rollin'. And not a lot of recorded material exists from that time, but I mean, as the drummer, you had the perfect view. What was it like on stage watching Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck learn how to do this together?
Well, it was interesting. It didn't always work, to be honest. Sometimes it was quite, it was quite difficult. It was quite a mess because they were playing over each other and stuff. But when they worked it out, when they had it all worked out and it all fired on all cylinders, else, but I wouldn't say it was like that every night. So actually quite rare in a way because they were very competitive with each other and they were totally different. I mean, in personality, Jimmy would have it all worked out what he was going to play, and he'd be very disciplined, he know what he was doing, and very careful. But Jeff would be the opposite. He'd be playing off the top of his head the whole time. It's different every night, so you never knew what he was going to play. But when it clicked, it was rather special, definitely.
And we mentioned that there isn't a lot of recorded material that exists from that time. I mean, have you ever kind of gone through and been able to find any other live tapes or anything like that from that era?
Yeah, this is the problem with the Yardbirds. Everyone's trying to squash out what else have we got. And I think there's only 3 tracks with the both of them on. And I don't think there were any live recordings. We did play the Fillmore, but I don't think that was recorded. I don't think there's any live recordings of the band with those 2 in it, which would be quite interesting.
Yeah. The lineup didn't last very long. In June of '68, you and Keith leave the band. Jimmy keeps it going for a bit under the new Yardbirds, which famously evolved into another band you may have heard of before, Led Zeppelin. And you and Keith went on to form the first lineup of Renaissance, which at that time was more of an acoustic folk band rather than the classical prog band it became and still is. What were your thoughts when you first heard what Jimmy started to do with that first Led Zeppelin record? Was there any, thought of, okay, maybe we should have combined what you and Keith were doing on the acoustic side with what Jimmy did on the electric? Well,
yeah, because I went round to Jimmy's house and he played me the first album, and I thought, oh, this is tremendous. He was basically using 50% of it was like what we played,
right.
Which was but it was very well done, very well recorded, great production, and of course great musicians, great band. And I thought, oh, this is really good. He's done a great job. And somebody came around to my house probably about a year or so after after the Zeppelin had formed, and they were doing a book about Zeppelin or a book about Jimmy Page, and they had some photos. They they showed me these photos of like the Zeppelin playing somewhere, and it was the biggest audience, ever or something. It's like, it was like 40,000 people or something, man. And I thought, oh, this never happened to us. I thought, oh, what have we done?
And I mean, unfortunately, we lost Keith early. 1976. He was only 33 years old. For me, again, when I was growing up and discovering all this, I thought Keith was just one of the great singers of that period. What was it about your relationship with Keith that led to the two of you forming such a strong musical partnership?
Well, he was a sensitive guy, and he was a spiritual guy. We really clicked on that level. We could talk about loads of things for ages. He was he was a very gentle guy. But unfortunately, I think, we both had the same problem. We both lacked confidence. He sort of lacked a bit of confidence. He didn't realize how good he was. He didn't realize what a good singer he was. And maybe, he was a little bit before his time. If he'd have kept going, he might have achieved that. It was a bit of a shame. But yeah, he was a lovely person, and we really did link up. Well, we weren't very deep, and not always with the result of drugs either.
And just kind of steering it back a little bit to your book and the themes in She Walks in Beauty. Did you ever use any of those techniques to reach out to Keith? Or
interesting, isn't it? Somebody asked me that. Yeah, somebody asked me, and I haven't actually. I don't know why. It's funny. Maybe I should try. He did come into a session one time I had with a medium a few months ago, and they said, "Oh, there's a brother in spirit," and I said, "Oh no, I'm a single person. I had brothers or sisters." And he said, "Oh, there's a brother of yours with long blonde hair." And of course, I said, "Oh yeah," and they said, "Oh yeah, he's with your wife." They're very very close and very friendly together, and that was lovely to hear that. I don't know why I don't know why I didn't pursue it. Maybe one day I'll pursue it and see what happens.
And kind of getting back into the musical realm, in '83, yourself, Chris, and Paul, the remaining members of the Yardbirds, you guys formed Box of Frogs and released the two records. The first record had an appearance from Jeff Beck. The second had a track with Jimmy. At that point, was there a reason why Eric was never involved, or did it just not come up?
Good question. I don't really remember. I don't know whether he was approached. I think I did speak to him about turning up for a Yardbird show we were doing in honor of the Marquee at I think in their 20th anniversary. We got together and we did a gig for a couple of nights there. I did ask him, and he told me, oh, he couldn't come because he was packing his suitcase to go to the States. I mean, that's what he said. So it was the only time I'm aware that anyone ever spoke to him. But that was, that wasn't about the Box of Frogs.
Yeah.
That was a similar time period anyway.
Well, and again, I mean, Box of Frogs had the two records, and a little bit after that was a reunion as the Yardbirds, which kind of kicked off with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in '92. And, once again, if I remember correctly, Eric wasn't at the induction of the band
Right,
either.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you've mentioned that you haven't really talked to him much. Do you feel he tries to kind of put that part of his career off to the side, whereas Jeff and Jimmy still, you know, not embrace it, but still take part in it?
Yeah, well, I think Eric was always someone that went through, big changes in style and almost in his character.
Mhm.
Maybe didn't want to look back on that
Mhm.
time period. I don't know. He probably comes and goes and probably thinks, oh, well, it'd be nice to have a jam with those guys.
Mhm.
And then the next day, oh no, I don't want to go there. I don't really know.
Mhm.
I don't not really in contact with him now.
Mhm.
Of course, if we saw each other, it would be great.
Yeah.
We'd be all over each other probably.
Yeah, and after that induction, was sort of the official reunion of the name, the Yardbirds, with you and Chris. At that point, Paul was involved in Box of Frogs, but why didn't he want to take part in the, formal reunion? I know about a decade or so into it, Top Topham came back in, which was pretty cool. But
Yeah,
why
yeah.
wasn't Paul involved at that point?
I think Paul sort of hung up his instrument in a way a
Mm,
long time ago. He stopped playing bass and he decided he was a producer,
mm,
and that was he sort of stood there, I mean that was it. Oh, I'm not really a bass player anymore. So he didn't want to do that.
mm.
Uh,
And I mean, for those that don't know, Paul Samuel Smith has been an amazing producer in his career with Cat Stevens and a million others as well. So that's understandable.
yes,
Yeah.
I think
Uh,
he saw his role as something quite different.
mm,
I, I suppose a little bit strange in a way, but that was how he felt about it.
mm. And we mentioned Renaissance a little earlier, and that band is still around. I believe they just did a 50th anniversary tour before the pandemic. Have you had any contact? I mean, the band has changed so much since you and Keith started it. Were you
Yeah,
approached at all for the anniversary of the band?
well, yes, I was. They did a reunion concert at the Keswick
Mhm.
in Philadelphia, isn't it?
Mhm.
Uh, and they asked me to join them. Um, so I played it a couple of nights. I played there and I played in New York in the town hall.
Mhm.
And they wanted me to join in on the song Island. They did Island, which I co-wrote.
Mhm.
So I played along with that, and I played a couple of others. I played on Ashes Are Burning as well.
Mhm.
But it was lovely. It was great. They had it really worked out well. They're great musicians, and they had an orchestra and everything. It was well done.
Mhm.
So I haven't seen it. I'm apparently on the movie. On the,
Mhm. And you still have a version of the Yardbirds that tours, well, outside of the pandemic. You were touring pretty regularly. Hopefully we
yeah,
can get you back on the road soon. So the name and the songs are kept alive by you on the road.
yeah, yeah.
Do you ever see a time when there'll be, maybe one last show with, yourself and Chris and Paul and, perhaps Jeff and Jimmy and Eric?
Well, it would be, yes, it would be great. I mean, I've no reason not to think about it.
Mm,
It would be fabulous if that ever happened. I don't know how it would happen, but
mm,
I think I have spent some time trying to do that in the past, but it's very difficult.
mm.
And I'd rather let someone else get all that together. Easier.
Well, we've been spending some time here just with the amazing Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds. His new book is called She Walks in Beauty, and it's a fascinating story for anybody that's lost somebody and has thought of these kinds of things, it's a really cool subject to take on. And, you know, of course, with Jim's great stories added to it. So Jim, I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's really been wonderful talking with you and just going through this history.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. It was, yeah, you're very well informed, by the way. Very,
Oh, thank you.
You got the knowledge.
Well, yeah, as a kid, when I was learning, music and guitar, I discovered the Yardbirds before I discovered the Beatles. So you guys were my education growing up. So,
Right.
so,
Well, you know the history very well. That's what's good.
well, again, thank you so much. Best of luck with the book. Again, it's called She Walks in Beauty. It's available everywhere. I know you have some on your website as well. So, and your first book was came out a few years back, which is called No One Told Me. And thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Okay. All right, Jeff. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.